There are a lot of different core training myths that I see out in the industry. Maybe you're watching on Instagram or YouTube and they're just wrong. But I want to be able to debunk some of those myths and give you some practical takeaways that you can implement immediately within your training. So myth number one is when people think that they are bracing their core, they're just crunching down. What we're typically finding is that a lot of people want to fix their anterior tilt, right? So if this is the back of their spine, they tend to be more extended this way. But what does crunching down do? It does this. So our goal, if we want to be able to kind of maintain really good brace, is to keep ourselves nice and tall. We shouldn't be super extended. We shouldn't be super flexed, right? We should be able to recreate this tall cylinder position. So what does that look like in actual practice? Usually when I'm coaching my clients, I tell them, and I want them to brace their core, I don't tell them to crunch down like this. I just work on a gentle anterior tilt, posterior tilt. Can you get into an anterior tilt and posterior tilt without losing height? A lot of people will posteriorly tilt, and what they'll do is they'll squeeze their hips underneath them and then they'll crunch down like this. Our goal is to be able to posteriorly tilt and stay tall. And if you give me a nice exhale, you'll start to feel your abs brace without feeling like you need to crunch down. So the first one is don't crunch down to brace your core. Get a nice posterior tilt while staying tall, and then exhale. Hold that breath, and now you've got a really nice intra-abdominal brace to lift with. Myth number two is gonna be that you want as much tension as possible whenever you're doing anything. And we see this all the time in physical therapy when someone comes in and they're dealing with back pain and their physical therapist says something like, hey, you've got a really weak core. And they teach them how to brace and lift for everything. But that's just not like a plausible way to live life. You end up moving like a robot. And I hear this all the time when patients come and they're like, yeah, even when I'm picking up a slipper off the ground or like mail off the ground, right? They have to like, they think about keeping this neutral spine position. They're very guarded and rigid. And then you pick something up. But if you're picking something up that is negligible in regards to like weight, you don't need to like brace for everything. Likewise, even doing exercises like a rear foot elevated split squat, Bulgarian split squat, whatever you want to call it. If I'm just holding weights like this, I don't need to brace, right? Because like these, you know, if I'm holding 50, 60, 70, 80 pounds, I'm not putting myself into any danger by keeping out to the side. I can just create enough tension to get the job done. Whereas if I'm doing a very heavy back squat, now I might want more tension, right? I want to generate as much tension as possible, increase that stability, because if I got 500 pounds on my back, I need to make sure that this is absolutely locked in. But that's not a way to live life, right? If you're picking something off the ground that's very light, you don't need to overly brace. If you're doing exercises like split squats or lunges and you're just holding the weight out here, it's okay. But once you put some load on your back, you probably want to create max tension. So just have different contexts where you want to create tension, have different contexts you want to relax, and have different contexts where you might be somewhere in between. Third myth is that neutral is this one very specific angle. And I see this all the time. Someone's like, am I in a neutral position? Am I in a neutral position? If it looks good enough, you're probably fine, right? There's no like specific angle of the spine and the hips that you absolutely need to be in. You know, whether it's here or here, right? The extremes. Everything in the middle is very variable. Neutral is a whole zone. It's not one specific angle. So when people ask me like, hey, am I neutral? Am I neutral? Honestly, one thing we're gonna talk about is we're always moving out of neutral, but neutral is a zone, right? I could be anywhere here, anywhere there, and I'm still fairly stacked. And in the camera view, you're probably thinking, whoa, nothing really happened. And that's the whole point, right? It's not like you have to be a completely straight line from your ears down to your heels. You can be a little bit more forward, you can be a little bit more back. And honestly, you're still quote unquote neutral. To be a completely perfect straight line in everything that you do, well, one, you're probably gonna always need a mirror or have someone checking you. And two, it's not really necessary in order for you to perform at a very high level. So think of neutral as a zone, right? It's not this one magic angle that you have to be in every single time you lift. It could be variable. It could be 5 degrees this way, 5 degrees the other way, and you'll be completely safe despite the fact. The last myth is that people say things like the spine is meant to resist motion instead of producing it. But honestly, there's so many different ways that the spine can move, right? We can go into flexion, we can go into extension, side bending, and we can also rotate. So one of my favorite ways to start to introduce some more dynamic side bending is gonna be this elevated side plank. As we come up here, we're gonna slowly lower our hips closer to the ground and then come back up. Lower it to the ground and then come back up. This is something that's gonna lengthen your glutes, the side of your back, your QL muscles, things that get pretty tight sometimes after a heavy lifting day. But what you wanna do is you wanna train the spine in these end ranges because it's never gonna stay in neutral when you're doing things that are athletic. If we wanna work on things that are rotational, we're gonna head to a cable machine. With the dynamic side plank, we get the side bending, and with this cable cross-body chop, we get our spine to actually start to rotate. So you wanna keep the knees slightly soft and just rotate your arms cross-body here. If we are going to improve the way our spine moves, we actually have to move our spine. If everything you do is resisting motion and staying in neutral, guess what? Your back is gonna feel stiff over time. So a lot of core training that you see on the internet, it's always geared around like keeping this brace and staying stacked. But core training needs to have that to some degree, but you also need to be able to challenge the extremes and get into extension, get into flexion, side bending, rotation. All of these things allow your back to be stronger and healthier. So if you want a really strong, resilient core, don't just focus on bracing it, right? And keeping everything tight down here. Really focus on getting neutral stack position without losing height, and also challenge your core, right? When it's side bending, when it's rotating, when it's flexing, when it's extending. All of these positions are super important to maintain a strong and resilient spine.